Howdy, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Follow the Leader. I'm your host, Lee Larson, and I did some little bit of traveling, went over to Virginia for you guys. Today, with us in the studio is Elizabeth Dempsey Beggs. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on with you.
Folks, I didn't just go to Virginia for nothing. I went back to interview and find the Virginia 1st District is what Elizabeth is running for. She's running as a Dem, describing herself as a new Deal Dem, military background. She's a mother. We've got a lot to cover today, folks. But first and foremost, Elizabeth, what motivated you to run for Virginia's 1st Congressional District?
Yeah, so I'm running in Virginia's 1st Congressional District because our current representative is not representing the people. He has sold out to get himself rich, to do whatever Donald Trump says. He's an election denier. He's made millions of dollars trading stock and has neglected his community, even people that have voted for him. You know, when people are like, oh, you're just running against him because he's a Republican. No, if he was doing his job, I wouldn't have blown up my life to do that. But he's not. So I'm going to step in and I'm going to do his job for him because I have 4 young children at home. And 10 years from now, they will look at me and they'll say, Mom, what did you do? They'll learn about this. They'll know. They'll see the Epstein files and see Pam Bondi tell us what the Dow was at. They already know about ICE, despite us not having a TV at home. But they know. And they're going to ask me, what did you do when children are being kidnapped off the street? And I refuse my answer to be anything short of everything I possibly could. And that includes running for office. My district has been a Republican stronghold with Rob Whitman in it. And it's now the #1 most vulnerable seat that they have. So when we talk about flipping seats and taking back the House at midterms and being able to put a stop to this is the seat we're going to do it in. This is one that is incredibly at risk, but it's going to take something new. It's going to take a bold vision. It's not going to be the same old playbook of someone who's still just going in for the title and going to get rich. I'm doing this because I love my country and I love my community. This is where I chose to raise my kids. This is my home. You don't just run away from your home. You stay and you fight for it. And I'm pretty good at fighting. I took an oath a few times to the Constitution, and I want to continue to honor and respect that oath. So between that and fighting for my kids and for everyone else's kids and for my parents and grandparents, this was the best way to do it.
Well, and you talk about how you're the incumbent is just not doing his job, not showing up, and you're running for Congress, but you're really running. You are covering 480 miles on foot running. This is real. This is not just me. Like, this is like she's actually running. She is a runner and has committed to seeing and setting foot in all 480 miles of her district. And that alone, folks, should tell you how serious she takes her commitment. It's a doubling down. She didn't have to do that, but she's here. One of the things that you have a very stacked resume, folks, like very awesome candidate. I really hope y'all go down into her website and look more into Elizabeth Dempsey Beggs. She was raised by a retired police officer and a nurse. Her father also served in Vietnam War, and she is an Army veteran. You were a tank commander. Talk a little bit about your military experience and your family, how your family sees service.
Yeah, my family sees service as something that's not optional. It is a duty that you have just by existing on this planet. Our family's motto is when you have more than you need, you build a longer table, not a higher fence. That doesn't just mean money. For some people, that's time. For some people, it is money. We all have different phases, right? And for some people, that is your creativity. That is your compassion. We all have an area where we're overflowing. And I grew up in a household. My dad served in Vietnam. He was actually an armor officer as well, but in the Marine Corps. And then he was a police officer, and he had retired from that, but it was really ingrained in me that we take care of our community. And my faith is a big part of that. I've taught Sunday school. I've had a crisis faith. I hate Christian nationalism. But it's something that calls me to love my neighbor, not ask to see their papers, not care how many hours a week they're working. It calls me to love my neighbor, and I don't have to know every single person who's my neighbor to love them and want them to be okay. So that led to me going into the military. I did Army ROTC. I went on a national 4-year scholarship. I graduated high school in Southern Utah. I'm from Virginia, but my family had moved around some after my brother passed. And I went to the University of Kentucky. I actually interned for the Republican Party during that time and was like, nope, we're good, actually. Grew up a little bit. I saw the rise of Trump coming, this Christian nationalism, this MAGA movement. We all thought it was a joke at first, and a lot of people left at that time, and I was one of them. So I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Kentucky, where I did Army ROTC, and I initially went in with the plan to go right into law school, to go into the Reserve Corps, looking to be an intelligence officer, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I fell in love with being in the field. I fell in love with leading soldiers, and when combat arms opened up to women, because when I joined ROTC and took my oath of enlistment and went on my contract, all those things, it was closed. But by the time I was looking to commission and graduating with my undergrad, Congress had just lifted the ban, and I decided to go for it. I said, I know I'm qualified. I know I'm capable. Women have been serving in these roles for so long. And I had a lot of resistance to that by some cadre. I remember one of them was really supportive, but we couldn't figure out how to get my lapel right because the women's uniform is different than the men's, and the branch insignia was so much bigger than it would be on a women's. They didn't make a women's size of it. But that that was a really cool experience. I was one of the first 50 women to serve in combat arms. And I did my training. I went to Fort Riley, Kansas, where I integrated an infantry battalion. So I was the first woman to get to that battalion, the first to serve in my company, and to make sure that it was a safe environment for junior enlisted soldiers to come to as well. I actually met my husband while I was stationed there too. And so it's another part of the service that we believe in. He went to the United States Military Academy, and his mom was an officer in the Air Force. She retired shortly after we got married after 32 years. And by the time we left the military, I left first. I took a corporate job for a while and was just so dissatisfied. I made good money. I was the breadwinner, had a flexible schedule, a lot of things people were looking for. I was just like, I need to do something more. I need to serve more. When we left the military, we wanted to become foster parents because that was another way we felt we could serve our community in the way that we felt called to serve our community. Then my husband took it one step farther and quit his job to become a firefighter. He took a pay cut. He is in recruit school, so he went back to being bottom of the barrel after being a company commander and then working in the Pentagon and these titles and things and money, but he wanted to serve. And I fully supported him in that because it's something that's always been important to me as well. And something I hope that we are instilling in our kids.
Absolutely. And you talk about how you were the first in a lot of ways. You were the pioneer. What has being the only woman in a male-dominated military environment, how have you learned and grown?
Yeah, I had to get very comfortable using my voice and knowing who I am authentically as a leader. It didn't work to pretend to be something I'm not. I'm very comfortable in who I am, and I'm secure in who I am as a leader. It does not mean I'm not always learning. I'm 100% always learning. But there was always that question of doubt of, hey, do you belong? Right? And then we have people like Hegseth who are just feeling that fire, knowing that we belong, knowing that we are qualified, that we've hit all the same qualifications. There are the times we'd go to the gunnery range, and one of the civilians who was retired and ran it had never served a woman in uniform and hadn't even met one of us yet. It was like 2 a.m, the range officer, and he looks at me, he goes, so what did you have to do to get here? Like, what qualifications did you get? The other platoon leaders, second lieutenant, just like me at the time, he turned to me and goes, the same thing that I did, dude. What do you mean? Before I could even open my mouth. So there's moments like that. But what it really taught me, and what's really going to be important in not just this race, but in leading in Congress, is this idea of leading under opposition. That when I went into this role, I didn't hire a single person who worked for me, who was under my command, who was in my platoon. And they didn't hire me. They didn't pick me. They didn't volunteer to be in this unit. They were thrust into this, and they had doubts, and they had insecurities. And I listened. And I created a space where they could voice those. And that we could move forward, and we could build trust, and we could get the mission done, because it was something much more important than any of us. It was bigger than all of us. And that's what it's going to take when we talk about flipping a seat. Because the reality is, I'm going to need red votes. And there's a lot of red voters who are very tired of what is happening right now, but they need an off ramp. They need one that's not your traditional corporate Democrat who's just trying to get the title and be in office, who has no desire to serve them, listen to their concerns, because their voice matters. They still deserve representation. And that experience that I had integrating women there, and then honestly, the whole rest of my corporate career as well, being in a male dominated field and being a young woman there, gives me the ability to walk in those spaces and be very comfortable. Because leadership's hard in any aspect. But when you walk into a rally, you're up on a stage and all those people in that room want you there, and maybe they disagree 5, 10% of the way with you, right? But they're going to vote for you. That's a lot different than being able to lead when you walk into a room of 600 people who don't want you there, who did not vote for you, and who have concerns because they've had a Republican representative for 20 years. And that matters. And when it comes to getting things done in Congress, too, we still have to provide an off ramp for our Republican counterparts to come together and say, we look at healthcare. That's not something that's a red versus blue issue. None of these are, right? People are hurting with affordability. People are hurting with international security concerns. People are hurting in red and blue districts. And I am going to have to talk to my red colleagues. And that's good. That's how it should be. That's how it's been before. But I can't cower down to that, right? I can't only lead the people who ideologically are the same as me. That's not how the country goes forward.
And it's or just like the toxic bullying coming out of this administration towards anyone who disagrees or defies, and it's just people are exhausted. And I really like to see your campaign so far. It's been how do I want to say that, bright and energetic for sure. Like, you certainly communicated that passion and that energy, but there's a drive, there's a seriousness. You're not here to play. Yeah, you're here to win. You're here, probably like a lot of us, you're pissed off and you're sad, and there's a lot.
Let me be very clear. The reason there's a space for everybody on this campaign, even if they'd voted for Donald Trump before, or how far left you want to be, there's a space for you in this campaign because you matter, and we're all pissed off. And we're going to have dissent. There's going to be people who support me on sides of the aisles that they don't agree with each other on a lot of things. And that's good. In a two-party system that we have to have dissent. But when we have a president who won't allow any, even within his own party, I mean, look at Pete Hegseth. He already controls what media is now allowed into the Pentagon, and he's still kicking them out if they dare to ask a question. And the flip side of that is the president and his cabinet positions have created this environment, like you said, of bullying, right? But these catchphrases that to be a fighter and to be able to make change, because a lot of people are pissed off, and people should be really pissed off, to be honest. But that fighter and that catchphrase, like, it's not a catchphrase. It's not a tweet. We talk about how are we going to fix Medicaid and Medicare access. Like, yeah, you want me to say universal health care. That's not flipping a switch. We want to talk about the actual plan to get there, that we can make it happen under this administration. That's not me going up doing a press conference, yelling and tweeting one line out that people can rally behind. That is months and months of work in policy as we lead up and we implement universal health care. Yes, I'm going to fight for universal health care. That shouldn't be a question we have to ask. The question is, how do we get there? And that's where it gets boring. And that's something that, politics is boring. But Donald Trump came in and he shook it up, and he shook it up through bullying. And that's, we talk about all the failures of the Democratic Party on communication, and there's a lot. Trust me, there is a lot. And I will be the first to criticize the Democratic Party. But part of that does stem from a lot of these are boring. The things that work, that help people, that rebuild trust. Yeah, they're going to be a little boring, guys. Like, unless you're a nerd and into this, like some of us are, like I am, it's going to look boring. It doesn't mean that someone's not fighting. It doesn't mean that they're not making change. Trust me, I'll throw hands on the floor if I need to. I have no problem with that. But what people need is someone who's actually going to put in the work and is not going to fight just for one line, one tweet, one rally, who's going to put in the years of work that it will take to rebuild and keep fighting when it gets hard and when they get tired. Outside of that, it's easy to tweet, it's harder to actually do.
And it's also easier to tweet and blame Biden for everything. And you're like, at some point, guy, um, all the lies, all the different things, and that's exactly what I love you saying. That politics should be boring. Like, I think people are just exhausted, and the bullying, the toxicity. I want boring politics because bullying people or strong arming them or saying, promoting Christian nationalism. I'm like, guys, it's just been tough for a lot of people.
Well,
You,
that's
go
the part
ahead.
as a parent, especially, being in a red district, and my oldest will start kindergarten in the fall. But as a foster parent, I'm very tapped into the parenting community outside of the ages of my own kids. And so many people who, again, voted for Trump, like that he came in and shook things up, right? But so many are now seeing the repercussions of that in their children, in their school age children. And they're exhausted. I mean, exhausted by the hate and division. This isn't funny. It never was. But there was some humor elements to it first, like, oh, this reality star. But like, no, our country should not be treated like this is a reality show. And the drama and the hate is exhausting everybody. And a lot of it is intentional, right? It's meant to keep us down, to keep us from rallying because we're fatigued, right? It's like, oh, we need to go about ICE, we need to talk about Iran, we need to, all these things, right? While you're trying to pay your bills and you're worried about getting evicted and losing custody of your children because we don't have a livable wage and inflation skyrocketing. It's all intentional, but the hatred, people are so tired of that. Hate is exhausting.
It is. It is, and I know I've seen quite a number of posts online since this Iran war started of how angry people are. And I've seen so many things. I have seen the amount of money we've spent since then, what it could do. I've seen it on like, charts for education, for healthcare. Someone took that amount of money and overlaid how much track of rail line we could do for a high-speed railway across the country. Like we could have done that in one day, that of the money we spent in Iran. And I think, between Iran and DHS and ICE, it is hard for folks to see their money go towards things that aren't helping them. They're not benefiting from this. So talk a little bit about your approach to taxes and you being a New Deal Democrat. What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about. And again, it comes down to so much messaging of the Democratic Party and failures that we've had, to be honest, that people don't want to be paying more in taxes. No one wants that, right? And right now, the working class is exploited by tax code, and that is very intentional. So when we talk about these programs that help everybody, and we talk about the programs that have return on investment, and I'm an MBA, I do like the business nerdy side of this too, and as much as I am fueled by my passion, I also really like data and numbers. And we know the playbook onto having a stable economy because we've done it before. None of these things that we're proposing when we talk about being New Deal Democrats, these aren't new. These aren't radical. These aren't anything like, these are just going back to how things were and what worked before. This whole idea of trickle down economics, which clearly don't work, having the repercussions of right now. So we talk about these, and a lot of the opposition will hear as well, like, you just want to give people handouts and free stuff. Like, these aren't handouts, they're hands up, and they're the things. And I know people yell the dirty word of socialism. Socialism is actually a framework of capitalism. So let's be clear, we don't live in capitalism right now. We are much closer to monopoly, and we don't enforce our anti-monopoly and antitrust laws. And a lot of that comes down to campaign finance reform and all that. But let's talk about how it affects everybody in their day-to-day lives and what that tax code looks like. What I like to see, this idea of taxing the rich, which again, terrible messaging, right? Because people hear that and they think, oh, you have 1 million, 2 million in the bank. And that is not at all what we're talking about. We're talking about 200 million sitting in the bank, right? You'll earn $1 million. You can save up $2 million. That is a realistic thing. It's awesome, it's impressive, but that's realistic. Becoming a billionaire is not. The only way to become a billionaire is by exploiting the working class. So when we talk about these handouts, this idea that the Republicans did a great job of painting of the welfare queen, the real welfare queen is Walmart and these big corporations, right? They're the companies that don't pay a livable wage. They do internationally, but they don't here in the US. They don't pay a livable wage to almost all of their employees. Walmart's about 90% they don't pay a livable wage to. So then those employees qualify for SNAP benefits, which they turn around and spend at Walmart, which Walmart then turns around and gets a tax break for accepting. When Trump turned off SNAP benefits for political power, and I'm a foster parent, my kids rely on those, right? Their parents rely on those. When he turned them off, knowing people would die, like, let's be very clear, that was allowing people to die of starvation in this country. He didn't turn them back on because he's a good person. He turned them back on because Walmart was going to lose $5 billion. And that's one of his biggest funders. So we talk about what this means for the average household, though, right? The average household, you will be paying less in taxes, but actually seeing the benefit from them. Because yes, everyone hates paying their taxes, guys. I get it. I hate paying my taxes too. But what I really hate is when taxes are going for a genocide in Gaza. When taxes are bombing a school overseas. When taxes are bailing out companies like Walmart so their CEO can get just an insane annual bonus on top of an insane salary. Do I think people have the right to make money and be rich? 100%. Yes. Absolutely. Like, that's not inherently evil. But when it's done through exploitation, and it's done, even our tax code is so exploitative of the working class. Let me be clear, when I say working class, like, even if you're earning $1 million a year, you're bordering on working class. If you have to keep that job to pay your bills, a family making $400,000, you are working class. And our tax code is so exploitative of that because where how taxes are being spent doesn't benefit you. Right. We need to invest in programs that actually have a high return on investment and do benefit you, benefit everybody in your community. But also, look at childcare. You can't write off the cost of your childcare. You get a $1,200 credit, and that's only if your kids are under school age. Even though during the summer you still need childcare if you have school age children after school, right? But you have to have two parents go work to be able to pay your bills, right? Both those incomes are taxed federally. And then you have to pay for childcare to be able to go to those jobs to pay your federal income tax on that income, but you can't even write off that cost. But a CEO can write off the cost of a private jet as a necessary business expense. Sure, fine, let them write it off. But also we need to allow the families to write off then the cost of their childcare. And it's reframing the tax code in a way that is not, it's closing the loopholes, right? Would I love to have a wealth tax, raise that? 100%. 100%. But let's go as moderate as we can on this where everyone can agree. We just close the loopholes. We close the loopholes and we create a better system for the working class. And that allows us, we talk about all these programs that we know better communities. Universal health care, light rail, education, all of these things that we have had before with the New Deal that we had that grew a booming economy that allowed people to have the stability to go and open a business. We've had that. And it's just now exploited so that it only benefits your billionaires and your mega corporations. The American dream is not possible under the current tax code. I told you my dad is a Vietnam vet. It's only him serving in Vietnam is the only reason we are where we are now. Allowed him to get a college degree, but he grew up on the tail end of the Great Depression and lived in a dirt floor shack. His mom was a waitress. His parents got divorced when he was about 10. His mom had 2 children. His dad died when he was 16. His mom was a waitress and his dad was a janitor. On her own, she was able to buy a home, a 2-bedroom, 3-bath home in Phoenix, Arizona in the 60s. On her own as a single mom of 2 kids. By working hard. Now, did she work hard? Absolutely. But you take that situation you put in today's economy, there's no hard work there. There is no hard work that is getting you out of that. You either got lucky or you didn't.
I do want to go back to the economy because you're speaking so
Sorry, I
well
know
to
I
it.
bounced all over. I'm sorry.
No, you haven't. No, no, no. Or it's a good segue, but I want to talk about the military experience, Hegseth, Christian nationalism, and U.S. military policy right now.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like every week, every month, we are bombing someone new with no congressional approval, no idea of why we're doing it. We're just doing it, and then they tell us after. And it seems messy. We're getting a few days ago, there were reports of military commanders and chaplains talking about Armageddon and biblical law. And the sad thing on that I saw was that no one called that out. I didn't expect anyone to call that out, but in this administration, but that should be called out, right? That's like the DoD should have been like, no, this is not Armageddon, but he didn't.
Just because they don't have an answer. I mean, they don't know what the end game is. They don't have a plan. And you have them walking around saying, oh, well, the goal wasn't regime change, but the dream sure did change. Take this seriously. These are people's lives. These are people's lives overseas. These are children's lives. And these are service members' lives. And you're making jokes. And the president of the United States, the commander in chief, is saying, well, yeah, people are going to die. That's war. We're probably going to lose more. Like, I'm sorry we lost 6, but we're probably going to lose more. That's war. It's not going to be his kids we're going to lose. It's not going to be his grandkids or his rich friends' kids. No, it's going to be my kids, your kids. And, you know, anyone watching this, you have young kids at home. You might say it will be over. It's not going to affect them. Like, people know what they signed up for. Yeah, I was in kindergarten when 9/11 happened, and then I served as a combat arms officer in that same conflict. These are forever wars. There's no game plan. You can look at all the CIA intelligence. There's no game plan here. Democracy, you can say, okay, we're bringing them democracy. So let's be clear, the regime in Iran was terrible. We're not supporting that regime. That's not what we're advocating for when we're calling out saying that this was wrong. This was poorly executed. It was unplanned. There's been no oversight, no answers for the American people. Anyone asks a question, they get yelled at. We're telling service members that it's Armageddon, and that's the reason. Don't worry, this is God's plan. That's the problem. And democracy, it's not found at the bottom of a bomb. It's not found at the end of a gun barrel. It's through the diplomacy and, again, the boring stuff, right? But we've played this film out so many times. And how much more money and how many more lives are we going to spend? Because they're 2 weeks away from nuclear bombs and they're going to nuke us. No. And that region is so complex, right? That's why no one person can fully understand the complexities of it. But again, there's your boring answers, not your Pete Hegseth's little frat boy comments.
And something you've talked about early on was how your faith is important to you, and yet all of us are watching in horror this Christian nationalism justified by their theology, justified by their faith. What, as a faith believer, you don't have to go too into detail if you don't want to, it's up to you, but as a faith believer, how do you feel about Christian nationalism?
I hate Christian nationalism. I mean, such a passion. I walked away from, not having an idea what my faith was. Really dive deep into, what do I feel, what do I believe, around 17, 18, 19. And then around 2020, I remember telling my husband, like, I don't even know if I believe in any of this anymore. And I'm like, and if I do, this isn't right. But I felt so alone in it. I was a brand new mom. It was COVID. We were in the military still, both my husband and I. We were living in Georgia, and so we tried to find a few churches, and we walked out of so many sermons. We're just so disgusted. My husband was raised Catholic, and he'd left the Catholic Church before we got married. He would occasionally go to Mass. His parents were in town. Now he's fully left it. And, it took, we didn't go back to church again until we moved here to Virginia and settled and found one that we loved. It's like, hey, this is actually about Jesus. Christian nationalism has nothing to do with the teachings of Jesus. It has to do with men manipulating the Bible and weaponizing it to take power. And its growth is terrifying, and it should not be underestimated. It is terrifying in its infiltration into our military. Look at Hegseth. And and what he brings into the military. Look at his pastor saying that women shouldn't have the right to vote. That's not funny. And we can laugh and say, oh, they're never going to repeal it. A lot of the stuff that we've laughed and said would never happen is happening. These aren't jokes. So that's one that, yeah, I teach Sunday school, and my faith does guide me, but my faith guides me to love my neighbor. My faith guides me to care for my community, not to grab for power, not to try and get rich. And my faith guides me to respect all other religions as well. You know, there's rules in my home. I always say, like, my rules as a Christian foster mom, and it's starting with respect and with advocacy. And I always say my job is to raise table flippers. My job is to raise my kids to go out into the world and refuse to be silent in the face of injustice. That is what my faith calls me to do. My faith calls me to stand up and raise my children to do the same, to fight for everybody that does not have the same privilege as us. In my eyes, we're all children of God. And you can make arguments whether it's about abortion or 10 Commandments being in schools, all these. That's not Christianity. That's about control. That is about power. And, you know, it's even as a legislator. Sure, my faith can guide me on those moral principles, but my job isn't to legislate. We have separation of church and state. I don't get to legislate the Bible. Let's be clear, the Bible is written by man too, and has been changed and rewritten and all that so many times. I mean, we could talk about that for hours. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I am guided by my faith and prayer, and it's looked different for me throughout the years. I don't believe that there is one right answer, because the Bible changes, and different churches that preach the same Bible are going to tell you different things. I believe it's something that's incredibly personal to anybody, and that we have an obligation. The Constitution tells us that we have to protect everybody's right to religion and everybody's right from religion as well. So I can respect if you say, hey, my faith tells me that abortion is horrible and immoral and you'll go to hell under any circumstance. Great, the Constitution gives you the right to believe that. I don't agree with you, and I don't have to agree with you. The Constitution says you can believe that. As long as you are not harming anybody else, okay. You don't get to legislate that, though. You don't get to enforce that on anybody else because it's what you believe.
And not to mention, I mean, I was just watching Texas public schools and the Ten Commandments, and I mean, even from a theological or Christian side, I was like, well, hold on, like, which version of the Bible? And the Ten Commandments are actually printed 4 different times, Exodus and Deuteronomy. So, like, which of the 10? Which?
And they can't answer it because they don't even know, and they don't care, and they don't follow it. It's, yeah.
It's just sad. You know, we've talked about the military, we've talked about faith, and talked about how hard things are for folks. And I was reading a few days ago how DHS and ICE are funded, that if they were considered a military, they would be in the top 6 militaries. And they're DHS, they're ICE, it's a paramilitary. Talk to me a little bit about your stance on immigration.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to have the belief that immigration is always going to be an ever-changing policy, right? What worked 20 years ago is not going to work now, and what works now is not going to work 20 years ago. And something I have a lot of respect for is the work that the Biden-Harris administration did, specifically of VP Harris, that, you know, it's boring, so it doesn't get the attention and doesn't get highlighted, but being able to go into South and Central America, not invest our tax dollars, our federal money, but get corporations to commit millions of dollars to invest in job stability and infrastructure in those regions to address the core cause. Because if someone's leaving their home, I mean, that is the most difficult decision you can make. It's not what anyone wants to do, and I think so many people have this belief that because America is the greatest country in the world in their mind, and there are a lot of great things about being here, but that, you know, things don't have to be bad for you to leave, and everywhere else is awful, so of course everyone wants to come here, and that's not true. That's not true. And this country was built on immigration. And it's something we have to protect and we have to have respect for. But you look at DHS budget, $9 billion to 90 billion in 1 year while firing oversight committees, while getting rid of the IG. That's insane. And that's not rooted in any sense of justice, respect, ethics, especially why the court system on the immigration side is so incredibly underfunded and overcrowded. And it's something something people don't want to hear. They especially don't want to hear from their politician is there's never going to be one perfect solution. It's just like the Middle East. There's never going to be one perfect solution, but we can work towards better, and we are going to do better. And that starts with abolishing ICE. And that is a harsh word. That doesn't mean open borders, but means that has been so corrupted. I mean, even this administration is now admitting that it's corrupted. It's been so corrupted that we can't stand by and allow, you can't, try and just fix it at this point. You have to get rid of it and you have to rebuild something. And it's young. You can say, oh, well, it was NINS before. No, yes, it broke off of that when that was dissolved, because we do abolish federal agencies. But it was broke off of that, and their mission was to assist federal law enforcement in horrible crimes. Your top scale crimes. They were meant to assist if someone that was investigated for one of these crimes by the FBI, by the CIA, by even the state police, if they were found to be an immigrant. The ICE was there to assist. That's obviously not what's happening now. They've strayed so far from that mission. And the idea of, oh, well, you need to do it the right way. There's no right way. We've made that system so complex, so rooted in racism that it's interesting. When I go and I have conversations, and I intentionally go and I knock on the doors of people who vote for Trump, who might even have a MAGA sticker on the back of their truck. Go and I talk, and when they're willing to have the conversation with me, and oftentimes I'm able to convince them to, I always ask them, where do you think we differ? What do you think we really don't agree on so deeply that we can't even have a conversation? And recently, a lot of it's been ICE. And they're like, well, I bet you support abolishing ICE. I'm like, I support law enforcement. I support ICE and the brave work that they're doing. I always ask them, well, let's get to the root of that. What do you support about ICE? And to summarize most answers, because these have been a lot of conversations, right? But the root of it is, well, I don't want rapists and murderers on the street. My brother in Christ, I have 4 young kids at home. I don't want that either. So I'm like, we actually really don't disagree. But if that's what we want to talk about, let's look at the data. Let's actually look at the numbers we know and how we reduce that. Be like, oh, well, Laken Riley. Yeah, Laken Riley was, the victim of a horrendous crime. A horrendous crime that was done by a man. More ICE presence doesn't stop that from happening. We know what does, and that's where we need to invest.
Laken Riley's perpetrator is in jail. There's justice, and it's a strange thing to keep. The family has asked folks to stop, and you're like, and all of us are like, yeah, that's an open and shut. It's horrible, but it's justice was served.
We're letting children die. We have people who are citizens. Even natural-born citizens being harmed by ICE. And we don't even have to talk about Alex Preddy, Renee Good, who, they tragically lost their lives, and those are unjust, and there will be trials, and they will be held accountable to those actions. But you can talk about just your neighbor who's afraid to go to the grocery store, who was born here, but their skin's a little darker, and they're afraid to go to the grocery store. I recently spoke to a firefighter who was fearful that his 5-year-old is going to get taken from school every day. Both him and his wife are citizens. Their son was born here. That's not the world we want.
No. I hear when you were saying that you are trying to give folks an exit ramp, particularly ex-MAGA. How have folks, I know you've been campaigning, when folks come to you, they say, I've left MAGA, what are some of their concerns about supporting you or joining you?
I think something interesting I have to put out there, I told you earlier that I did intern for the Republican Party. My mom is a pretty big MAGA supporter. We have an estranged relationship, well, not just due to politics, well before that. And to this day, my dad will tell you that he's a Republican. He hates Trump. He'll tell you he's a Republican and he kind of looks for the good. And my in-laws even they voted for Trump. My dad never has, but my in-laws have. And it gives me that experience though of I've had to defend these ideals, right? I didn't grow up in a family that I'm a Democrat because my family was a Democrat. Um, and even being in the military, right? Pretty MAGA people, a lot, and a lot of really leftists too, and Democrats, but a lot more than you would like to believe. But anyway, so having these conversations, what people say to me, and not all of them are. I get a lot of DMs of, I left MAGA, I grew up Republican, I still have these conservative values. I'm like, there's a spot for you here. You have conservative values, and we get down to what it means. So, like, I just really value my faith, and I want to make sure like I'm able to practice it. And that I'm like, yeah, I want you to be able to practice your faith. I want everyone else to be able to practice their faith. Like, um, but I get a lot of DMs, ex MAGA, I really supported Trump. I thought it was going to be a change. Um, and even when I go to like the Republican committee town halls and these things in my district, sometimes I just sit as the fly in the back of the wall to hear what they're saying. A lot of it's so much disinformation, right? And here's the thing: when we talk to these voters, and I made it very clear when I brought anyone onto my team, I will not say a single negative thing about someone who voted for Donald Trump, or even that still supports this, because you know what? They did what they thought was best for their family. It doesn't mean they don't love their neighbor. It doesn't mean that they're racist. Are there some that are 100%? Yeah. That doesn't mean that. It means that when they couldn't pay their bills, when they're worried about feeding their kids and losing their jobs, they thought about their kids first. And they voted in the way that they thought would be best for that. And they were lied to. They had a different set of information than we did, not a different set of facts. 2 + 2 is 4 every day, right? But Donald Trump is very good at playing this game of, oh, things are so bad for you, not because of the billionaires, not because of people like me, but because of your neighbor who loves differently than you. They're so protected, they have more rights. That's why you don't hold a job because of DEI, not because I put tariffs in place that made your company close down. Focusing on transports and, oh, your daughter is going to be attacked, not the island, right? They did a really good job of that. But what people were looking for and what drew them to that was they needed change because so much of the system was failing them. So much of the system on both sides was failing the majority of Americans. And we talk about banning congressional stock trading. People are like, oh, well, Democrats do it too. I'm like, yeah, I know, and I want to ban it for them too. Like, uh, these things, right? Citizens United, these that really harmed your everyday American, that harmed 98% of us. And he came in and he said, I'm not a politician. I'm going to change it. It's going to be different. I was able to capitalize on that because people are hurting. And that grew and grew and it festered. And we've seen this play out before. I'm not just talking about Germany in the 30s. We've seen it play out before in many places, right? Even starting a war with Rally Around the Flag. We've seen it. When I go and I talk to them, it has to be this off ramp of we're not going to agree on everything. We shouldn't agree on everything, right? My version of gun control reform might be a little different than what you want. My stance on abortion might be a little different than what you'd want. But let's have these conversations because you need an off ramp. And it prevents that. Even, abortion, that's one. And that's when I talk with my mother a lot about. You don't have to love abortion. No one grows up dreaming of the day that they're going to go get their first abortion. It's not the goal. But we have decades of data to show us what actually lowers the rate of abortion. It's not bans. And people are shocked when we talk about, hey, a 6-week ban actually increases the rate of abortion. And we have to talk about those things. And that's where the off ramp comes from. But if we're just yelling pro life, pro choice at each other across the aisle, you're not actually making progress. You're not actually helping anybody. Being able to say, hey, even, you can be as pro-life as a Christian as you want. And I respect that if that's your belief. But then you should be voting Democratic because that's what actually lowers the rate. Right? Access to birth control, increased wages, paid parental leave, affordable education, affordable child care. These are the things that actually support families and reduce. Yeah.
Elizabeth, you have been fantastic today. Where can folks donate, volunteer, or just learn more about your campaign?
Yeah, an option. So, and I'll be honest, when I ask for donations, I mean, I feel yucky every time. And a lot of it comes to the education that I don't take corporate money, I don't take APAC money, I don't take foreign interest money, I don't even take party money. What actually keeps my campaign running, and I'm very transparent on where all the money goes towards. Once a week, I give out a report on exactly what I've spent where. It's only funded by people donating. And I hate that that is the system we have. I hate that I have to look at people and say, hey, if you can commit to $5 a month during this race, and you can subscribe to my race, subscribe to democracy, like another subscription we're all drowning in, that actually allows us to go and make change so that we don't have to keep asking for this. Because we have really good plans when it comes to Citizens United. We have really good plans for campaign finance reform. But those can't happen until I'm here asking you for money for it. And it sucks because I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, like, you know, you were picked to run. I wasn't picked to run by the party, but they fund it for you. I'm like, no, they don't. Like, there's no, which is good though, because I'm not beholden to anybody. I'm beholden to the people I represent. So if you are so inclined to donate, it means a lot and it keeps us going. You can do that through my website. You can do that through Instagram. So it's elizabeth4virginia.com, and Instagram is Elizabeth4Virginia. Same TikTok. I know we went viral on Twitter, so I had to download the X app for the first time in my life. And for volunteering, the same thing. Our volunteers are also what really helps power us. You know, even the signatures required to get on the ballot, that's me and volunteers knocking doors. You know, we're not paying $100,000 of your donations to go have someone else do that work for us. I'm out there and I'm knocking the doors and I'm making the phone calls. I'm doing that all myself because that's my job, and it's a really cool job.
Well, you are an awesome person, awesome candidate. Virginia 1st District. Y'all, you got a solid rock star right in front of you. Don't forget to check her out. As she said, that is Elizabeth for Virginia. It's also on her socials. You can learn more about her issues, her campaign. Follow how, like I said, she's running and she's actually running 480 miles. So check that out, and man, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you to your family's service. And I have nothing but good wishes for you and your community, because you, I appreciate the anger that you're bringing too. Thank you.
What's justifiable rage? Anyone who's feeling this rage here, please know it's justifiable. You're not going crazy. You're not being hysterical. You're not yelling into a void in a wall. This is justifiable rage. And you should be mad, but you have to take that and we have to do something with it. Because I'm not going to let this anger carry over to my children.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming to the studio today. You and your kids, you've got little ones, and you've got a campaign, and you've got a lot going on. Thank you again for taking the time to come and chat with me and for caring about Virginia District 1. Folks, that is this year. Keep your eyes open, ears open. Elizabeth Dempsey Beggs for Virginia District 1. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Folks, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. You know the drill. Is there someone in your neck of the woods that I can interview, platform, and support? It's all of us together. It's going to take all of us. My name is Lee. This is Follow the Leader, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.